declare the sitting of the National Assembly of the Parliament of Ghana to be duly constituted and in session. Mr. Clerk, please read the prayer. To be exceptionally alarmed about, just as a precaution and in keeping with the undertaking given by the Parliament Office to have every facility available. There was a stretcher for it there, which I've asked to be removed because I think we could be tending a little too far. We'll go back to the ambulance and hopefully will not be used. It was only for demonstration purposes, not to be used. On a more serious note, honourable members, this morning I received a letter from Mr. Richard Allen informing me that he was resigning his seat as a member of Parliament in effect from the 5th of April 2013, Mr. Allen's resignation has therefore means that his seat in this National Assembly has become vacant. The vacancy is in accordance with Section 99A of the Representation of the People Act, Chapter 103 of the Law of Ghana, to be filled by a person whose name is to be extracted from the list of candidates from which Mr. Allen's name was originally extracted. As Mr. Allen's name was extracted from our Partnership for National Unity list of candidates, I have, in accordance with Section 99A of the said Act, called upon the representative of that said list to further extract from that list the name of a person who is willing to become a member of this National Assembly to fill the vacancy in the Assembly. Thank you.
Presentation of petitions, presentation of papers and reports, etc. Reports from committees, oral questions without notice, questions and notice, statements by ministers including policy statements, personal explanations, request for leave to move the adjournment of the National Assembly on definite matters of urgent public importance, motions relating to the business or sittings of the National Assembly moved by Minister. Introduction of bills.
Honourable Minister of Finance, the bill.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to present the Fiscal Enactments Amendment Bill 2013, Bill number 11 of 2013, a bill into an act to amend the Income Tax Act and the Property Tax Act. And I now move said bill be read the first time.
Thank you. When the bill be read the first time.
Fiscal Enactments Amendment Bill 2013, Bill number 11 of 2013, Public Business, Government's Business.
Honourable members, we will now resume the debate on the budget for the year 2013, this being the last day that we set aside for this debate. Today will be the government's chief whip, Ms. Leah Bashir.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. The history records are replete, Mr. Speaker, of visionaries who have been scoffed at, some burned to the stake, some assassinated, and just to show the dreams of Leonardo da Vinci with the flying machines of the 14th century became a reality in the 20th century. More dreams of Martin Luther King Jr. I have a dream. And has that dream been attained that Martin Luther talked about?
Good question.
Yet people still dream for its realization. When Martin Luther King said that it was 100 years since the abolition of slavery, still Afro-Americans were still treated as second-class citizens. But Martin Luther King was a man, a leader, a wise leader, that warned. He warned. And so even though, he says, we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. Dreams are based on the hopes and aspirations of all. When Martin Carter wrote in the University of Hunger, "Oh, long is the march of time women waged throughout mankind to be able to achieve our dreams." If one is to talk to every single Guyanese, man, woman, and child, well, what are their dreams as individuals? to go to university, to be a businessman, to own a home, to find a good man, to find a good woman. These are dreams. Some are realized, some are never realized. But that hope and dreams keep our spirit alive and keep us struggling. Mr. Speaker, when we were before 92, and we were dreaming and struggling for a time when there'd be free and fair elections, and we worked towards the restoration of democracy, those dreams were scoffed at too. I remember a journalist interviewing Dr. Cheddi Jagan on the eve of the 92 elections and saying to him, "But Dr. Jagan, why do you want to leave Guyana now? It is a collapsed state. It has nowhere to go." And Cheddi talked about that it was the PPP that would bring Guyana out of the depths of inequity and deprivation that it was in 1992. Mr. Speaker, I am not one of the youthful members of this parliament, but I do have a long memory. Mr. Speaker, I have grown up in the 60s with a dream of hydropower. I have grown up with the hydro potential of our country. This dream has been around with us from the 1950s and 60s. And today, this dream is closer to reality than ever before in the United States. Mr. Speaker, I'm old enough to have known when there was Atkinson Airport. And then when the new airport and the adaptation of the present airport that we have was done. And we talk now about a brand new airport. And I hear the naysayers say, why don't you wait for the planes to come and then build a new airport? Well, it's a chicken and egg story. If you don't have the runway and you don't have the capacity, no planes will come. And so it's always a chicken and egg story. Where do we start? Where do we start? We have to start with a leap of faith that what we are doing is in the best interest of our people and our country. The opposition has given arguments on hydro and the airport, and they're contradicting each other all over the place. I just want to say, Mr. Speaker, I was in Grenada on the eve of the invasion of Grenada when Prime Minister Maurice Bishop was running the country. And I saw the Cubans building the brand new airport in Grenada. Grenada before had a tiny little airport that was actually quite dangerous to fly into in those days. And there was this huge land being cleared, and Cubans and Grenadans and other volunteers that came from all over the world to make this happen. And it is this, the building of that new airport, which would open Grenada for tourism and economic activity that was unimaginable, that is what contributed to the invasion of that country by a foreign power. Mr. Speaker, the last international hotel we've had in this country is Pegasus, which is now locally owned. And yet I've heard all sorts of comments about a new international airport. Isn't it time, after all this period, that we are able to rise above nitpicking and at least say, look, here's the vision. These are the things we need to do as a country. And that let us see how to make it better. If there are problems, let's see how to make it better. Not to just go around and smash things down and talk about rejecting and cutting. And we have the indentured laborers who came here and struggled too, to end indentureship, another form of bondage. And then we struggled for independence, for our freedom as a nation, to put our flag up and to be called a nation, Guyana. Not British Guyana, but Guyana. And our struggle, Mr. Speaker, for democracy, for free and fair elections, came to pass. All these dreams, and they took a long time. These were not dreams that overnight happened. But what sustained people was the belief that it would happen and they could do it. And it is so today, Mr. Speaker, so today, that when in 1992 we took over this country, the reconstruction, a collapsed country, in those days, 20 years ago, they didn't talk about a failed state. But Guyana was a basket case and a failed state in '92. And if Mr. Speaker, in 1964, when Guyana was the third highest ranking country in the Caribbean, and we had been able to continue running this country as the People's Progressive Party, we would be so far away, quantum leaps away from what we are today. But Mr. Speaker, we had to start all over again. And if we think it was an easy, Mr. Speaker, we have struggled and abided and we're resilient and consistent, and we've made mistakes and we've made gains. We as a people, we as a government, we as an opposition, we as civil society, we as communities. But we have learned as we've traversed these 21 years. Because it's an emerging democracy, an emerging developing country that has achieved much. The Honorable Deborah Bakker says, I missed the vote. But I want to just say to my comrade over the other side, I may have missed the vote, but the vote I am supporting knows exactly where it's going. And I must carry, Mr. Speaker, that the canoe, the balahu, over that side seems to have too many paddlers that don't seem to be paddling in the same direction. So they're going round and round and round. They better watch out, they're going to overturn. But at least I know my boat is on a steady course. Mr. Speaker, we are challenged in many ways. And the budget talks, the budget makes it clear that we have to overcome our challenges together and we have to accelerate the gains. We have seen countries make gains. And when there's political instability, or a political climate that is fraught with problems, how fragile that growth is, how fragile that economic gains are, and how easy we can reverse. And so we must take seriously this discussion and debate on the 2013 budget. This is a do and die issue for all of us in this House. We're not playing children's games, we're not playing hopscotch, we're not playing jacks. We're playing with a nation's development and its future, and we have to recognize that. Mr. Speaker, we are challenged much as a developing country. Global warming, where we're a country that to 9 feet below the sea, we will always have to pump money into drainage and irrigation. I heard one of the speakers yesterday talk about $7 billion into D&I, and it's not being effectively used. It is not being efficiently used. Let's see how we can make it do better. But if we do not want to go back to the days when there was no money going into D&I, and when the canals and corporates were closed in this country, so that in 2000, all said that corporates could never be open because they were closed in the 70s. Because someone 7 to 9 feet below the sea meant nothing. But Mr. Speaker, we admit the global economic, financial unpredictabilities that are around us and will impact us as a primary producing country. We recognize that internally we have our own issues, our own challenges of 788,000 people, no matter which way you cut it. We don't have enough people for the tasks and jobs we have to do today. We don't have enough bodies. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, we must embrace other peoples, other skills to come in and work with us to build our nation. We have always had a friendly immigration policy. We will continue to have that because we want to take the best of the world. I have heard speakers, Mr. Speaker, talk about immigration and how people are leaving here in boat loads or plane loads. Mr. Speaker, the International Organization of Migration figures between 1959 and 2004, and this is the UNDESA, have put out figures for Guyana or other countries. They've taken immigration data from the recipient countries. And just for your own information, between 1974 and 2004, 87,993 Guyanese left this country as permanent residents to Canada. The average being 6,000 odd persons per annum. And that between now, at this time, 1997 onwards, we have had a 55% decline in the average migration to Canada from Guyana. Mr. Speaker of the United States, do you have any idea of how many, I'm only talking about legal people, obviously, not illegals. Between 1959 to 2004, 45 years, you know how many people we lost legally to the United States? 253,895. And the highest recorded years, 1982, 1986, 1987, 1990, 1991, recorded the highest numbers of 10,000 per year to the United States. And Mr. Speaker, between 1998 and 2000, the number of persons leaving this country declined also below 50%. The average between 1979 and 1988 were 8,860 people. And the decline between 1990 and 2004 is 15% to 20% below the years in the 1970s. Mr. Speaker, I believe that when we come to Parliament, it is nice to the tag to wag the tail to wag the dog. But we must also come here with some level of information to guide the Parliament. Mr. Speaker, is everything perfect? No. Have we conquered everything? No. Can we do things better? Yes. Can we improve? Yes. Who would come to this house, on this side of the house, and indicate that we are doing everything perfect? But Mr. Speaker, progress is visible. Progress is palpable. You can see it. You can see it wherever you go. You cannot be like a donkey with blinders on, with tunnel vision, that you cannot see the progress taking place in this country. And why would we as Guyanese belittle? Why would we belittle what we have achieved? And why don't we point to where we want to go? Mr. Speaker, the pro-poor, pro-growth policy of this government and its approach to national development started before the 1992 elections, when we were preparing and anticipating that under free and fair elections, the People's Progressive Party Civic would win. We could have chosen, Mr. Speaker, to go on a direct capitalist path, fund the money into the economy, fund it into the private sector. And we didn't. We took a human, people's-oriented path to development. And the concept of pro-poor, pro-growth was created. And the pro-poor, Mr. Speaker, of the social safety nets. Because in 1992, 67% of the people were below the poverty line in this country. And yet the IMF and the World Bank, I remember as a Minister of Health coming to tell me, as a Minister of Health, that we must have cost recovery in health. And they went to the then Minister of Education, God rest his name, former Minister Dale Bisnott, and told him cost recovery in education. And this government, this party, said no, 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 no. We make conscious choices. Mr. Speaker, one has to make choices and judgments. And there's nothing wrong with the opposition saying that your choice was wrong, your judgment is wrong. That's not a problem. Show us how, show us where. But the choices, health, education, water, when 58% of the people had access to water, now we're almost 90% of the people have access to water in this country. Housing. No house, no income house was built for 10 years. And when Chetty Dragon sat down in 1994 and said, let's see what we could do about housing. Because 93, 94, when you went to the countryside, when you went in Georgetown, right here in the city, you have 20 people living in a place with one latrine and one faucet. We forget, or certain people will be living in certain parts of the city. I don't remember it. But Mr. Speaker, housing has not only provided shelter for people, which is a human right, and water, which is a human right, and the right to education is a human right, and the right to health is a human right. But Mr. Speaker, It is the impact of these things, which speakers before me have referred to. Millennium Development Goals, universal primary education, moving to universal secondary education, gender parity in the primary schools. Unlike in other countries where girls don't get to school, girls in this country are thriving and showing how well they can do. In fact, Mrs. Speaker, we have another problem. We have a problem that the boys are sliding behind, not the girls. And so, Mrs. Speaker, these are social issues we have to confront. And it requires an entire nation to solve these issues, not just a government or the opposition badging. Mr. Speaker, just as an aside, the housing. If we tell the story of housing, it is a story that is a dream that has come true for individual people, but also what it did to the economy. When we started, we were very naive in a sense, provide shelter for people. We never envisaged in '93 that it would have the boom on the construction industry. It would create shortage of skilled labor in the construction industry. We never anticipated the manufacturing that would come from it and the small businesses that would come from it, outside of people having a decent place to live. And we never envisaged this, Mr. Speaker, that between 2006 to now, 50% of the households have been given to single women or women by themselves with their own name and nobody else is on the title. If you men don't know, but that's how I don't understand what I mean to women, you're going to lose a women vote. Because women are empowered in this country for the first time. Mr. Speaker, the path we chose, we could have, was a slower path than if we'd gone the straight capitalist model, gone the Hong Kong way, the Singapore way, the Asian tiger way. We could have chosen that path, and we didn't. We chose a path which has consistently, over 21 budgets, consistently held a position of pro-poor and pro-growth. We have not deviated from that, despite Chani Jaga died, and we've had Mrs. Jagan as president, and Jaga as president, and Ramatano as president. We have not deviated philosophically, ideologically from that. Mr. Speaker, I have heard we have catered for the poor and vulnerable. Not just the poor, the vulnerable. Women can be poor and they can be vulnerable. The elderly, Amerindians, disabled, children. And the budget reflects this policy. Budget doesn't make policy. Budget is the means to the end to take the policy and breathe life into it with what are the three things? Men, money, and machines. That's what a budget is about. Three things. Men, meaning men and women, obviously, and money and machines. The policy is there, pro-poor, pro-growth. And Mr. Speaker, I have heard people on the other side say that the PPP is a minority. But I remind this House that until the day one of these two parties on the other side can have the single largest block of votes, the PPPC is here, and is here to stay. The PPPC on this side stands for all the Guyanese. You do not hear us talking this side about our constituency. Unlike what we hear on that side, where you talk about the 160,000 people who voted for the two parties. But it means the rest of the people don't count when you say that. And we are saying as PPP, we represent all the people. Mr. Speaker, we have heard comments about Naisuko and GPL. But Mr. Speaker, what is the alternative? I heard the Honourable Member last night, Mr. Nagamuto. I heard them talk about wastage and all these things. And I was wondering, when I listened to both of them, more particularly the Mr. Nagamuto, I remember that, what was the alternative with GPL and Naisuko? GPL provides an absolute essential service to the Guyanese people. And so, it may be a body. I mean, I'm not sure if I should use that word, hydroseed. I don't know. I can say hydroseed, that's a medical term.
What Mr. Nagamuto said last night was a slip of the tongue, but if you were to use it deliberately, you would have to strike.
Well, I'll give the medical term. Is that
Of course, the medical term is
hernia. earlier. So I won't say hi, Christine, I take that back. But Mr. Speaker, we tried privatizing GPL, and we ended up having to take it back and run it. We had to do it because the alternative, what is the alternative? How can we come to this house? It may not be efficient, it may not be a number of things, but we have a master plan, we have to deal with this in greater detail.
I don't have any answer.
But the GPL, Gaisuko is now, according to some of the speakers, this weight of milestone. But no one complained about Gaisuko when the sugar levy was holding up this country for the 80s and 90s. When the sugar workers, sugar levy kept this whole country going. And it's the PPPC who kept back the sugar levy. But Mr. Speaker, there are many things I would like to quote from the World Economic Forum 2012 report on the global gender analysis, which shows that we're way ahead of many other countries. Economic participation of women is 94 of 135 countries. Education attainment, 28 of 135 countries. Health and education, 47 of 135 countries. Political empowerment, 32 out of 135 countries. Our Millennium Goals, all these things show that we are moving. Mr. Speaker, one of the interesting things that just, I don't want to, yeah. The IMF working paper is called WP/12/276 IMF, the challenges of fiscal consolidation and debt reduction in the Caribbean. Mr. Speaker, on page 5, it talks about the fiscal performance in the Caribbean during the last 15 years and talks about the fact that the debt accumulation for an average is 70% of GDP in the 2008-2011 period. This is the Caribbean. It goes on to say that individual countries' experiences show that most countries had the highest debt buildup during the first period, that is the earlier period. But aided by heavily indebted poor countries initiative and the multilateral debt relief initiative, Ghana's debt more than halved between 1997 and 2011. It also goes on to say on page 12, debt to GDP ratios increase in all countries with the exception of Guyana. And the magnitude ranges from as low as 3 to over 20% percentage points of GDP. In fact, it continues to say that in Guyana, the debt decrease was strongly facilitated by high GDP growth rates. The high contribution of interest rates was not due to higher interest rates as in other countries, as these decreased on average from 5.2% to 4.6%. Mr. Speaker, this document is on a website, but if the House wishes to photocopy, I have no problems with that. It's a public document. Mr. Speaker, issues have been raised about transparency and accountability. And we have to talk about this. We have signed international treaties to do with the Inter-American Convention Against Corruption, the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, and the 6 human rights treaties. And reporting to all of them and go before them to be reviewed. We have been reviewed by CEDAW, we're up to date. That is a convention for the elimination of discrimination against women, the rights of the child. We have one report that has to be sent in for the other reports. We have submitted to the International Social and Economic Committee on the Convention on Social and Economic Rights, etc. But Mr. Speaker, on the Inter-American Convention Against Corruption, which we have been a signature to, and we sit on the MESAC, which is the panel that reviews all countries, and then we are reviewed by those countries. We are up to date in the 3rd cycle, and in this year, we start the 4th cycle. And that will include a on-site visit to Guyana. So, Mr. Speaker, we are trying to abide with our international treaty obligations, which to me are the international standards we're trying to reach. I am not particularly moved by what Transparency International has to talk about us. It doesn't impress me, because I sit on an expert panel on corruption in Latin American Caribbean that goes through and looks at laws, frameworks, processes, and tries to make that every country improves. And if you think that the paragons of virtue of the United States and Canada, let me tell you that in Latin America and the Caribbean, we're the countries that have no laws that allow what is called facilitation payments for foreign investment in your country. In Canada and the United States, they have laws that if a company comes and passes a bribe to anybody here, it is not against the law. It is against the law in Guyana. And so, Mr. Speaker, those are international obligations, our regional obligations. But also, Mr. Speaker, and by the way, I've heard someone comment about the fact that the Honourable Member Dr. Ashley talked in the beginning of his speech about our resort to the OAS, etc. Mr. Speaker, we're a signature to the OAS, to the Democratic Charter of the Americas. And there are clauses in those charters that can be invoked to protect countries, not only to protect victims of human rights, but to protect countries that are under threat in terms of democracy. We have a right. We are not only on the receiving end, we can also as a country go before the UN or the OAS and appeal for help. So this is our right. This is not an issue that is debatable, Mr. Speaker, but there are internal issues. Out of the constitutional reform, out of the parliamentary reform, Mr. Speaker, we have some of the most progressive oversight mechanisms for the entire Caribbean CARICOM. And we should be proud about that. Certainly we have to keep improving. Certainly we have to make it work better. But when the PAC, under this so-called new dispensation, started working in October of last year to review the 2010 and 2011 reports, then that's your problem. That's not my problem. When the parliamentary sectoral committees are only appointed in February this year, whose problem is that? Whose fault was that? Because when the Honourable Member, Dr. Rupert Rupert, I listened to him yesterday, raised a number of interesting issues. The place for that examination, if he had sat on the sectoral committees, he'd know that in-depth, profound discussions and calling in members of boards and companies and ministers before them. This is how it worked up to 2011 September. But you know, new rooms sweep clean.
Honourable Member, your time has elapsed. We have an extension.
But Mr. Speaker, inclusivity, Mr. Speaker. Civil society, NGOs, communities. Mr. Speaker, this budget, as all the budgets, if the honourable members on the other side believe that Dr. Ashley Singh and ministers do not consult with their stakeholders about what has to go in the budget, and all that is funneled into a funnel area where we can then say what we can do and what we can't do. If we don't look at the participation across with many groups, the private sector has come out supporting this. The private sector is not and the private sector, by the way, in the 1980s and 1992 was almost non-existent. Thanks to nationalization that was taking place. And so, Mr. Speaker, there is now an emerging private class, a private sector that is wants opportunities and wants to get out there. We have investors coming in, but you have 20-odd Canadian companies in this country. When you've had a gentleman from Jamaica, Odino will remind me of his name, making very positive statements about this country. Why we like to undress ourselves like this as Guyanese? Why we like to put ourselves down? Is this what the colonizers did to us? Is this what the colonizers did to us? That it made us always want to put ourselves down? But Mr. Speaker, our greatest challenge is in the area of the political environment.
That's right.
Every issue is a problem. Every issue is an issue. And Mr. Speaker, we have seen that there's this stymie of changes, of amendments, of movement based on the so-called new dispensation. Mr. Speaker, in concluding, we, the people of Guyana, we, the government of Guyana, are being tried and tested at this time. And you in the opposition, AFC and APNU, are also being tried and tested. Also, the times require, Mr. Speaker, visionaries and wise leaders, not myopic, not nitpicking, and not thin-skinned leadership. We need leadership that is clear and have the courage and the strength to do what is right. It is not about the tail wagging the dog. Political leadership is about doing the best you can with the environment you have and being able to make change, and good change, not bad change. Mr. Speaker, this budget will be a challenge to cut, as some say, as it caters and moves Ghana forward. It moves the development of our nation forward. It provides an opportunity to see where we can fix things and do things even better. And it is premised with the numbers and the areas it is dealt with to improve the quality of life of our people, all our people. Mr. Speaker, for those who, whenever we start the estimates, wish to use the scissors, axe, the knife, the razor blade, I wish them well. I wish them well. Because you cut from here and you take it put there, it doesn't work that way. So, Mr. Speaker, I look forward to when we come to the estimates. But, Mr. Speaker, the budget of $208 billion reflects the good standing of our nation, of the good standing of our economy, and our ability as Guyanese to improve and to overcome the challenges of the last years and in the last year, and to still be able to come with a budget that is still pro-poor and pro-growth. We have been honorable and kept to the promises we made to the Guyanese people and what we made in our manifesto. Mr. Speaker, this is the last this is the last day of the general debate. To call on the other side, to be wise, to be wise. Wisdom isn't about following the popular course. Wisdom is about judging what is right and what will the best interest. And so, Mr. Speaker, I commend this budget to the House. I thank and congratulate Minister Ashley Singh and the Ministry of Finance, Bishop Mitchell, and most of all our President and Cabinet who approved the budget for us to bring to this House. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable that the President of this Republic has invited me to consult on any appointments. I have accepted those invitations and I held the last one being consultation with the appointment of the Chancellor of Judiciary and the Chief Justice. The President has never invited me to any consultation for which I failed to attend. Secondly, I submitted several months ago a list of my recommendations for appointments to the President, and there was some exchange of correspondence from the head of the Presidential Secretariat. But I've never received any correspondence from the President inviting me to any consultations or to any matter concerning the appointment for which I have not responded. Thank you very much.
Mr. Speaker, just to clarify to the honourable member, Mr. Bridger, I never used his name. Furthermore, I talked about that there's been no appointment. Now, they may have 100 jobs discussions, but there has been
I got the impression when you spoke, when the leader of the opposition had been called upon and had failed to I believe that the point of order and the clarification given were in order. I thought about that. The honourable member is Desmond Chopin
not only here in the National Assembly, but also globally. I think it's unfortunate that the government side believes its own propaganda, that everything is hunky-dory in relation to this. I would advise that that side of the house take more time to go on the streets and talk to people individually, not in orchestrated meetings, but in meetings in which it is that you will be able to get frank opinions of what people feel. I want to begin my contribution to allude to two developments which took place here during the Honorable Finance Minister's presentation. The first broadcast of his presentation outside of the Parliament building. And I believe, sir, that the second issue, which I will also report to them juxtaposed against the first, will expose the government's undemocratic behavior. The decision to broadcast from the National Assembly assumes tremendous importance, particularly in the context of a motion that was passed in this House on Friday, August 10, 2012, which resolved that this National Assembly declares that the right of citizens to assemble and to demonstrate peacefully should not be hindered by the Ghana Police Force or any other agency or institution of the state. Secondly, the Ghana Police Force shall relocate its barricades so as to allow freedom of assembly within a closer proximity of the National Assembly building. And third, the Parliament Office makes arrangements for the broadcast of National Assembly sittings in the environment of the National Assembly. It cannot be overstressed, Mr. Speaker, that the resolve clause of the motion and report call for three distinct courses of action, which are intended to help enshrine democracy in this country of ours. You will recall that during the debate of the motion, the Minister of Home Affairs attempted to belittle the proposal to broadcast from the National Assembly building by claiming it would be a nuisance and disrupted the agencies and organizations in close proximity to the National Assembly, including the sittings of the Assembly. What has transpired is the system was used successfully and the Minister was proven to be wrong. My only complaint insofar as the broadcast was concerned was that little or no advance publicity was given to the public about its implementation. While offering congratulations to you, the clerk and the staff, I'm compelled to say that I hope we will now move to institutionalize the arrangement and further. I hope it is not the intention to broadcast now and in the future only selected members' presentations. Sir, if that is the intention, Parliament also begin to engage in a better of crime against the people of the country and making a mockery of the third resolve clause in this motion. Already we have seen that the London Finance Minister's speech has been broadcast, thereby making a mockery of the motion. As I said during the debate on the motion, people want to know what the representatives are saying, when they are in here, and nothing should preclude them from knowing and being involved in the process. This becomes even more important in light of how some members' contributions are being dealt with by NCN and other media houses. Parliament, sir, is obliged to do all within its powers to give real meaning to the motion. Mr. Speaker, the intention was never about partial implementation of the motion, but implementation within all of its aspects. It is clear that clauses 1 and 2 of the motion are yet to be implemented in keeping with its stated intent. The barriers around the Assembly are more restrictive than before. We in this honorable House have to be concerned about the lengths the government is prepared to go to in order to recognize the trampling of the democratic rights of citizens. That behavior makes a mockery of the finance minister's boast of the efforts of the People's Progressive Party civic government to build a better Ghana for all Ghanaians. The second issue I wish to report is in relation to the finance minister's lament in his speech of the positions the majority members of this House have taken in respect to issues of national importance over the months of the life of this 10th Parliament. He dared to lecture us if one thing is true, it is that on November 20th, 2011, a shift took place in the voting pattern in Ghana, which sent shock waves down the spine of the people of the people. That shift, Mr. Speaker, saw more than 10,000 persons, not one. I repeat, Mr. Speaker, more than 10,000 persons abandoning the PPPC and voting against that party. Yes. The leaders of the PPPC are trying their best to understand what that development means for their future existence. They are wondering how many more will abandon them in the months ahead.
How many more?
But like the proverbial ostrich, which hides its head in the sand, they seem not to want to understand that in taking the actions they took, that 10,000 more voters had demonstrated the extent to which that they had become fed up with that party and had deliberately aligned themselves with forces they have confidence in. By doing so, those forces took a conscious decision to mandate the majority of the course of action that irretrievably changed the status quo. What is taking place in this National Assembly is therefore what the people want. Some people call it the fascinating name people's power. By whatever name it is called, it represents a determination by the people of the country that what existed prior to November 28, 2011 will no longer prevail. Let me take this opportunity to offer some advice to the Honorable Finance Minister of this minority government. You should get out of your ivory tower and go on the streets. You'll be surprised when you hear what people are saying. You will hear them saying to the majority that in the PPPC, we have a criminal cabal and a dictatorship to dismantle, and dismantle it is possible. Mr. Speaker, we who sit on this side of the House are obliged to respond to the demands of the majority of the populace. The Finance Minister and the rest of the leaders of the PPPC and the remainder who sit on the opposite side of the House are better get used to that idea and do so quickly. Mr. Speaker, it seems to me that the Finance Minister and the government's concept of democracy is that the government talks and cracks the whip and the majority jumps. That is why even when he talks about consultation, part of the principles of it in the breach. If consultation enjoyed a high meaningful priority on this government's agenda, we will have been dealing with a budget today which I'm sure will not have been as contentious as this one is. As the situation now stands, the budget in its present form must not suffice. It must be changed to reflect the true situation in the country, or must be voted down. Mr. Speaker, I want to touch on public sector wages, salaries, and other benefits. Mr. Speaker, as I sat against the Minister of Finance on various plans for 2013 on March 20, it occurred to me that he was engaged in a lengthy exercise, one that consumed more than 3 hours of spewing what I described as pure rhetoric out here. One could not escape the feeling that as we sat through this web of fantasia, he was engaged in rehashing a set of principles which he has been making year after year. What was even more disturbing to me, not surprising, was that he completely ignored the proposals made to him by AP and the AFC for relief to the most vulnerable categories in the society. Sir, it boggles the mind that throughout his lengthy discourse, he gave no real thought to entertaining the earning power for that large group of people who fall within the category known as public sector workers. When will they be improved? Is it the government's intention to address these grave anomalies? Sorry, Mr. Speaker. What the minister, however, did was to play his usual con game when he tried to give the impression that workers earning in excess of $50,000 per month, which went from year of income 2030.
Then I remember the reference to the minister playing a con game doesn't rest well. The drawn. You may say that words used a bit slightly hard, but a con game connotes negative.
Okay, we move on.
That's how I use it. I don't think there was because the situation, not that that be removed and it be replaced.
I would say unacceptable mistake. That workers earning in excess of $50,000 per month will from year of income 2013 benefit from a huge package of relief as reflected in the reduction of personal income tax from 30% to 30%. What the Honorable Finance Minister deliberately failed to do was to point out that there is a very large number of workers in this country who earn far less than $50,000 per month. for those who earn in excess of that amount, in money terms, the astronomical relief he alluded to amounts to 3 1/3 cents in every dollar they will be required to pay. With an inflation rate of 3.5%, Mr. Speaker, the low-paid worker is not better off in real terms. Mr. Speaker, there can be no substitute for immediate increases both in the earning power to cushion effects in the rising cost of living and improving the allowances and other conditions of workers. Let us not pretend otherwise. The much sought after increases in salaries and earnings and allowances should be seen by the government as an investment in people and not merely as a payoff. It endows workers with the capacity to address, albeit minimally, the problems posed by the escalating prices in goods and services, which occur with great rapidity. Whereas the increased allowances that nurses and other personnel employed in the health sector have been clamoring for 20 years after the last measly increase was given. Why are retired nurses who are reemployed and I believe contracted are not being paid the gratuity and other benefits paid to other contract workers? Are they in fact contracted? If they are, the government is obliged to pay them their entitlements because they are giving service over and beyond the call in an effort to give meaning to the troubled patient care delivery system. What about the conditions of work for all other public servants? When will they be improved? Is it that government's intention is to address these grave anomalies only when strike action is taken? I submit, therefore, sir, that the failure to address these questions with the urgency they deserve is unconscionable, as intended to impose greater burdens on an already enslaved group of workers. In that situation, Mr. Speaker, it is incumbent on the majority of this House to encourage and be part of workers' efforts to improve their lives. On the question of governance, Mr. Speaker, I want to say that the Minister of Finance in his budget speech devoted only 2 paragraphs to the very important issue of governance. In the one-sentence first paragraph, he tersely stated that events which have unfolded since the November 28, 2011 general and weekend elections, particularly in the National Assembly, have tested the mettle of governance systems and political maturity. The second paragraph merely referred to ongoing reviews of Guyana's treaty obligations, a subject which could be better treated in an earlier section of the minister's speech dealing with foreign relations. This section on governance merited much more extensive treatment. Since the good governance, Guyana's growth rate would probably have been in the double digits, saying that the economy is moving from a very low economic base. The minister is reluctant to deal with the subject of governance because of the indefensible behavior of his party, which, having lost its parliamentary majority, seeks to make the opposition ineffective by tying the latter up into courts. And the president is acting like a general secretary, rather than a head of state, refused to sign any bill with which his party is not in agreement. Guyana would have seen the more stable society and welcoming environment for domestic and foreign investors, and a more attractive alternative location for those skilled and semi-skilled would-be immigrants if the president, soon after the last elections, had sought to engage the opposition in inclusive governance arrangements or some form of genuine shared governance. Rather, there was a rush to form a one-party executive government in keeping with the 20-year-old tradition of winner take all. Good governance relates to the effective implementation of democratic practices, the full participation of all stakeholders, political, civic, and private sector, fair and equitable treatment for all, including non-traditional supporters, transparency and effective disclosure, and regular and timely reporting to those whom the elected are supposed to be representing, especially information concerning the results of feasibility studies and related choice and identity of foreign joint venture partners, accountability, particularly with respect to the determination of project costs, and a level playing field relating to the bidding and tendering process.